Thank you. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction and also for inviting me today. I'm going to share my screen, uh, presentation now. So, my name is Erica. I'm a research fellow working at Massachusetts General Hospital. I'm very grateful to have the privilege to work in the MND field. I moved from Italy 4 years ago. And I'm very happy to work along with Dr. Sabrina Paganoni. So I want to start by saying thank you. As you know, it takes a village. So thank you for, first of all, SPF for having us today here and for all the support that is wonderful. And the positive vibes that you have. It's amazing. For all the sponsors, the families that supported us. And also I want to say thank you to Dr. Hiroshi Mitsumoto. He's in the corner left. He really started all this great work on PLS, involved Sabrina, who you all know, she's amazing, and she involved me. So I feel very like honored to work with her and to be on this journey. So I just wanted to share a brief update of what we've done all together in the last 2 years. So starting from 2024, we organized the third International PLS Conference. This was a great success, and it brought together more than 100 participants from around the world. And right after this conference, actually, there were like many other opportunities. And I have to say that starting from 2024, thank you also to Sabrina that was leading all this work. We moved pretty fast. In fact, I'm just going to share like a few work that we've done together. So just, prepare your phone if you want to scan some QR codes. Um, right after the conference, actually here in January, thanks to the SPF, we were able to publish the video of this PLS conference on their YouTube website, putting together all the presentations and the recordings. And we had a lot of views of this video. So this was great. And we are very thankful for them for supporting this. And then right after in February 2025, the MNDA Association actually reached out with interest after the successful conference on PLS and wanted to write with us a blog post about the conference. And if you scan the QR code, you can read highlights of this symposium. And then we worked together with all the researchers that met in Montreal from all over the world. And I have to say, this was like pretty quick as well, like in June. So we worked together 6 months, but as you know, like academical papers take some time. So I have to say 6 months was not that much. We worked all together and we're able to publish this paper. You can scan the QR code. It's an open access paper. And basically we gathered all the insights that were discussed at the PLS conference. And the main question was about what is this critical path to PLS clinical trials. And we've also published, you can scan the QR code again, a PLS research summary, kind of summarizing the main topics of this paper. And here, again, this is the same QR code that I was sharing before. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of what we included in this critical path to clinical trials and all the advances actually that we are doing. So first of all, natural history studies, registries, biorepositories from institutions from all over the world to collect data together from people with ALS. to guide researchers and deepen our understanding of the disease characteristics. And then we are refining clinical outcome measure to assess the disease progression. In this paper, we also talked about the importance of neuroimaging to deepen our understanding of PLS. And then we also discussed biomarkers. So we are studying biomarkers that are already that have been there since many years, but also like working on additional methods. And then in 2025, so actually last month in December in San Diego, we had the first PLS conference that was part of the main track of the International Symposium on ALS MND. So I forgot to mention that in 2024, the PLS conference that we had was one day before the start of the huge international symposium, whereas this year was part of the main track. And for us, this was like a big achievement. And also it reflected the growing recognition of PLS within the ALS MND research field. And the session was such a success that right after the session, actually, one of the staff of the MNDA actually came to me and Sabrina and told us that he was like, that MNDA was very interested in making this an annual meeting. So I just wanted to share this because we are already planning next year meeting. And in fact, we announced at the meeting in 2025, 2 PLS abstract awards honoring the legacy of Turza Campbell and the Marin family. And here you can scan the QR code and see the LinkedIn post that we've published about highlights on this PLS session. And here I'm showing you the 2 prizes that will be given in 2026. So this is a lovely picture of Turza Campbell. They are sponsoring an award for basic science innovation in PLS. And then we have the Marin family who is sponsoring a clinical innovation in PLS. Here as well, you can see the lovely picture of Mr. Marin and his wife. And so, yeah, I just want to conclude by saying that, as I mentioned, like planning is already underway for next year's PLS session. And we're very happy and grateful for this opportunity. And we are hoping to make this an annual event. And also the recording of the PLS session that was held in San Diego in 2025 will be available for everyone on March 4th, 2026. And we will be sure to share this link with you all once it's available. And also actually scheduled for tomorrow, we also help the MNDA to write a blog post about this session happened in 2025. So stay tuned. And now I'll turn it over to Sabrina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. And I think we can also share the slides with anyone who may be here today or even anyone else who couldn't make it today. And I know you did a great job putting the QR codes so that people can go back to that. And then, whenever you want, you can go back to all of these resources. So I will just say that, it's always such a pleasure to meet with this group. Some of you I met in person, others I met online, and then I also see new faces. So I feel like this is almost like a group of friends and people that are meeting on a regular basis. I know you have more meetings, but for me, it's great to be here every few months to think about, how can we, work together to advance PLS research. So in our role as physicians at MGH, Eric and I try to, again, think about new ways to bring new attention to PLS, new information, new awareness. And as you've seen from the slides, that's actually happening. And, and obviously all of this is also in collaboration with the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation. So thank you for that also, Norma, and the team at the SPF, because you allow us to also advertise a lot of this content, share the content, so that, our goal is for anyone with PLS, wherever they are, we want them to be able to access information in as real time as possible in terms of the research and the advances. And so, again, that's why, we have, we have published a few things, and Erica definitely has been instrumental in all of that. And there's more to come, right? The blog that's going to come out tomorrow, the videos that are going to come out in March. So, and then obviously the annual conference. I do want to spend a second to talk about how important that is. Obviously, there are other conferences that where PLS, is front and center, like obviously your own conference at the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation. But the particular session that we were referring to is part of the annual symposium on ALS and MND. And so it's a way for PLS to be present also in a larger research ecosystem where, the knowledge and the advances that happen in ALS, which, as you know, is a separate disease, but it's also more common. And so there's more investment there in research. We want to grab anything that we can from ALS and translate that into PLS. So this sort of new synergy, I feel like, is something that I think will really accelerate things for all of us. So I know Eric and I are here, we wanted to share the information about the conference and again, what to expect. But I know that these meetings are often, an opportunity for people to ask questions and see, if there's any topic in particular that you would like us to cover, also based on what we discussed at the conference. I don't know if we want to start with your questions as well, Norma, or what are your thoughts?
I think that would be perfect. And I always have questions, but I really always want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask their questions first. So you guys, if you got a question, you want to put that in the chat box, please do so now. And then if you have a question that you want to come on and you want to ask verbally, then please hit that button down there and raise your hand and I'll call on you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sabrina. Cynthia, you've got yourself muted, but I'm going to call on you to talk whenever you're ready. You got a question or a comment? Go ahead. Cynthia, you're on mute.
I was trying to unmute.
There you go. We can hear you now. Go ahead.
I have two questions, please. One is that I had always, my reading and all had led me to believe that this form of MND, PLS, was more closely related to ALS than to HSP. I'd like to know from a medical standpoint whether or not that's true. And the second question is whether any research has yet begun on the cause of PLS.
Yeah, no, those are great questions. Maybe I'll start taking the first, and then Eric, if you want to maybe share some of the learnings from the conference that we had in San Diego about PLS research, because all of this is evolving. And so that's why this is an ongoing conversation. In terms of your first question, so your first question is PLS more closely related to ALS or HSP or both, really? So it's interesting. So I'll offer a few thoughts. So historically, because PLS, sometimes is confused initially with both. I would say that's, at the beginning, as some of you may have experienced, it takes a long time to get diagnosed with PLS. And that's because sometimes, based on the criteria and the fact that there isn't one test to diagnose PLS, physicians entertain different possibilities, and only over time, after somebody has had certain symptoms for, let's say, 3 or 4 years, one can actually say, okay, you are more HSP, you fit more with HSP, or you fit more with PLS or ALS. So all three are in a way related, but there are some differences. So first of all, in terms of, so what makes HSP and PLS somewhat related is that both diseases affect one part of the brain called the upper motor neurons. These are the nerve cells that connect the brain to the spinal cord. That's true for both PLS and HSP, so that's the similarity. There's also a difference, though, and the difference is that the way these upper motor neurons are affected is different, actually, so much so that for people with HSP, mostly the legs are mostly affected. For most people, it's not true 100%, but that's kind of the typical way to present with HSP, with the legs affected. And instead with PLS, sometimes it's not the legs, it's more speech or even the upper body. So yes, the part of the brain that's affected is the same when you compare PLS and HSP, but it's affected in a different way. I don't know if that makes sense, Cynthia.
It does. I had thought that HSP was predominant in children or younger people, however, and that PLS was manifested in older people primarily.
Yeah, unfortunately, in these diseases, it's very hard to say that anything is 100% true because everyone is different. And so unfortunately, while we try to generalize or find some similar characteristics more for the purposes of discussion and sharing what's most common, the reality is that there are so many different presentations. And so it's true, you're right, that HSP can present in children while PLS normally doesn't. It's not impossible, but normally does not present in children. At the same time, though, both can present in adults. And so that's the challenge, that there isn't kind of a the criteria or the boundaries are not so strict, and that's what makes it hard to differentiate things.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And if I may add, Dr. Sabrina, I've heard Dr. Fink say that there is a juvenile PLS.
Right.
So I don't know what that age is, but that still, that affects kids, right?
That's true. That's why I said, PLS usually doesn't affect kids, but on rare occasions it can, and that's actually what you are referring to. It's the juvenile form of PLS. Normally, even in the juvenile, it's more like preteens, teens, while HSP can actually potentially even start even earlier. But yes, again, it's hard to say it's always like this, or it's hard to say this is absolutely always true, because again, everyone is different and the diseases are so complicated. Yeah.
To me that because we've got so many different parts of this thing that it's hard to get your hands wrapped around. So I think it's got to come back to what kind of symptoms are people fighting and dealing with, and how do we work on those kind of therapies?
Yeah.
Well, that's why I said primarily. I understand that there's a lot of individual difference, but I'm just speaking in broad terms.
Yeah. One thing that, your question was also about PLS and ALS. So interestingly, from a clinical perspective, historically, many people with PLS are seen in an ALS clinic, even if they don't have ALS, which in a way seems a little strange, right? Because, why many people of PLS receive care or see their physician in an ALS clinic? There has to be more. It has to do more with the way these clinics have evolved historically. And oftentimes it's people with neuromuscular training, which is a specialty. And because at the beginning, it can be hard to differentiate PLS from ALS. And PLS can also affect the upper body and speech. For that reason, oftentimes people with PLS are seen in an ALS clinic. But there's a lot of continuity with HSP clinics, and I know that now the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation is actually helping to support the very first network of HSP clinics, which is such a fantastic new initiative that we're very excited about. I know you also had it. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you got a question over here by Tim. He said it would be nice to provide some clarity on what studies are available specific to PLS. You can read that. There seems to be several studies that come up, and you need to clarify whether they are looking for ALS, PLS patients, and how much overlap there is. My neurologist doesn't provide much information regarding trials or any potential alternative treatments.
Yeah, so I would just comment, this is Tim, I would just comment, I do go to a ALS center, so talking a little bit about the treatment. My neurologist is fine, but does not provide much information regarding any potential studies, what's being worked on, et cetera. So, you get various requests, get involved in the CBIG study or, these types of things. In a lot of cases, they don't want you. So you kind of get down this path of, well, how far am I going to chase this? Because it's going to end up that they don't want, my information. And or if they do, I have piles of information. It's difficult, quite frankly, to transfer all that to people, right? If I take the viewpoint of, all right, I have this, it's a rare number, of people that have the disease. Someone should want our information, right? And it should be easier, so to speak, to, really communicate what's going on. It's, I was on one of these calls the other, I don't know, a month ago, and, it was brought up about the startle reflex. Well, startle reflex is real, right? And I was on the call, and the particular doctor said, well, I don't know if that's really part of PLS. It just makes you wonder, where is all of this information kind of getting collated when you're talking about PLS? And it's a little frustrating, quite honestly, being a patient in that instance that, you're here, I would like to share, what's happening. And I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of similar, symptoms, but it does vary person to person, obviously. We all know that. But sharing as much information into a common repository, I think would be helpful. And it just seems extremely difficult for people that do want to share to really get it anywhere.
Yeah, no, so these are all important considerations. And then I'll ask Erica maybe to tell us more about the studies that are recruiting people with PLS right now that were presented in December. Part of the challenge, and I completely agree with your frustration, I mean, part of the challenge is that PLS hasn't had a home at these big scientific conferences, but now, again, thanks to the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation, there is a place at the National ALS Conference. Now, because of what Erica explained, we have a home at the International Global PLS Conference, so that all of this information can be shared also within the academic community, also within the researchers, so that, for example, actually one of the talks, there was one of the abstracts that was part of the PLS conference in San Diego, interestingly, was about the importance of the startle reflex in PLS. So funny you should mention that, right? I mean, this was actually front and center. And then this presenter actually couldn't come, but submitted the abstract, so the information is known. This is to say that it's also important for physicians and researchers to talk to one another and have a home at these conferences, so that that type of knowledge can be shared, because it may not be present in all sort of textbooks, because maybe it was not recognized when the textbook was published, but it is now increasingly recognized, exactly as you're pointing out. And so, if somebody came to the conference and read the abstracts, they would have known, some other physicians, they would have realized that the startle reflex is important. So again, this is to say, actually the award that was awarded by the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation for the best abstract, right, for the two best abstracts at the NEWS conference, which is the US-based one. One of the two was about the startle reflex, the same research. So again, if anyone participated, if any physician participated in the ALS conference and learned about, the scientific presentation about this, again, they would know now that the startle reflex is a symptom of PLS. In fact, they got the award from the SPF about this. So this is unfortunately an ongoing work of communication and dissemination of the research findings. And I agree with that, it's frustrating that it has taken time, but I guess the point that Eric and I want to make is that this process now has reached critical mass. We are now at the point where instead of being sporadic communication, it's more ongoing communication on a regular basis. And that hopefully will help solve some of these communication gaps. Now, to your specific question, I mean, I see that you are seen in an ALS clinic, and again, because I described earlier, historically, it's been really the home for PLS as well. And normally, many of and I think it was also in the chat what you wrote, many of the ALS trials do not include PLS. But that's exactly why we had a conference last year, and I see Mr. Maran actually joining. So thank you again. Many of other people, including people on this call, have really sponsored these conferences and made all of this possible. But now we're trying, thanks to what we're discussing at these international forums, we're trying to make the case that there could be a PLS group within those larger trials. In fact, we just published a paper on that when we met last year. That's a separate paper with the World Federation of Neurology. We made that case, Dr. Mitsumoto and I. So this is still ongoing. Again, it's I'm sorry that I wish I could tell you it's already resolved, but certainly now we have a number of people who are working in that direction. And in fact, some of the studies that were presented in San Diego are recruiting people with PLS. They're not drug trials. They are more registry or biomarker studies. And maybe, Erica, you can tell us more about the ones that were presented. But the fact that now we have more opportunities to gather the data, exactly as you were saying, that allows us to take the first step.
Dr.
Yeah, and I think that, the question that would come is, again, from just a communication to, the PLS community of, here's where you should, here's where it all kind of comes together. So there isn't a lot of communication, all right, you try this, no, and, it would be very helpful to have a point to say, I have PLS, here's where I can share it with you. Someone wants that information, I would think, and a more clear, common, communication of this is where you go. That would be extremely helpful, I think, for people.
Dr. Sabrina, I think there's some other questions over here. Or Erica, what in your opinion is the most promising, news, Cathy, concerning PLS right now?
Yeah, Erica, do you want to share, from the conference in San Diego, anything that grabbed your attention?
Yeah, so thank you for all your questions, first of all. Going back actually to the first question, like briefly, I was thinking about, and Sabrina, then, feel free to jump in, but I was thinking about one of the presentation, Dr. Hande from US, she spoke about like efforts to better understand like why upper motor neuron degenerates in PLS. Like she doesn't have, one single answer, but she basically said that researchers are uncovering what makes them vulnerable, and basically they're studying like patient genetics, human nerve cells under microscopes, like blood samples. And so that was a very like promising talk. So I mean, it's always good to learn that there's not one cause that we can kind of like look to, but there are like many different things that they are studying in order to understand why specifically those like upper motor neurons degenerate. And then talking about all the biorepositories, I was thinking about Dr. Benatar's talk from US, Miami, and basically he shared findings from the CREATE consortium, and CREATE actually like stands for I looked it up because, sorry, I couldn't remember the exact, but it's clinical research in ALS and related disorder for therapeutic development. So it starts from like ALS, but they're actually refining tools to better measure like meaningful changes in PLS over time. And so he basically explained that there are new approaches that are more sensitive to see like real world changes experienced by patient in PLS, because that's one of like, kind of the main, we have many trials in ALS, and let's say at the beginning we were thinking that we could share those trials for both ALS and people living with PLS. But as the disease, it evolves in a different way. It's a little bit difficult to have kind of a sort of like one umbrella for everyone. And this, like talking about this, I was also thinking about what Dr. Lee from Colombia shared. So he shared results from this multi-center natural history study of PLS. And basically what they found is that functional decline tends to be faster earlier in the disease and then slows over time. And I mean, this is like crucial actually to kind of thinking about clinical trials that can enroll people like earlier in the disease course. And so, you know, these were kind of all, it was beautiful to see like all the ideas from kind of different groups that are working like again towards that critical path to clinical trials. These was, I don't know, Sabrina, if you can want to add anything else, but as you know, you were all asking great questions. These were the things you know that came up to mind. And thank you also, Norma, for sharing about starter reflex. I didn't know how, you know, it started. But you know, yeah, it was incredible to see that one of the award at Niels was actually, you know, given to that specific abstract. And also at the end of the session, um, back last month in San Diego, at the end of the, maybe it's gonna be in the video. I don't know if they cut like the last part, but so the presenter who couldn't attend because the flight was delayed, so we didn't hear about all the starter reflex study. But then at the end, Hiroshi went on stage and he actually like, you know, he basically acted to show what was the starter reflex and was so like, you know, happy to share that, you know, that was not something that previously was kind of like taking into account. And so, I mean, I didn't know that everything started from that kind of,
Yep.
you know, let's say that dinner, but like, you know,
That's
just by hearing people.
Yep. That's
Yeah.
absolutely how it started. It was just so
Yeah.
organic. And it was so wonderful to see that folks were able to understand that and articulate that so that that researcher, you know, Dr. Hiroshi's life work and all the things that he put into that, he's incredible, and we will forever be grateful for him to elevate it to the level that he has. And I think that's what we've got to continue to do, is to find the other things that are the problems. I mean, because one of the things I understand is that when folks get diagnosed, they usually have to wait like 2 to 5 years before, you know, some will finally determine that it's PLS. And by that, you know, we've already gotten so far along. We've got to elevate the need for those biomarkers and those studies and find some way that, you know, everybody can get a little treatment a little earlier.
Yeah, and to the point of biomarkers, because that's very important for diagnosis, to help with diagnosis. I do want to point out again, some people, I think Tim and Jeff also in the chat, commented on sort of what studies, you know, are there studies that are open, registries, biomarker studies, or other opportunities? Actually, there are. So they're not always open, but there are some that are still open. And so specifically, Dr. Benatar's CREATE consortium is available. So that could be one possibility. I saw Linda, I think, on the screen, and I believe in Canada, they have a biomarker study that also includes people with PLS. So there are options. If people want to participate in biomarker studies, a few are available. In terms of registries, there are some registries in some countries, like actually the one from the Netherlands was presented in San Diego at this PLS session. The one run by Colombia is now ending, but the follow-up continues, so they're not including new participants, but the results will be published. We did try to see if we could add PLS to the CDC ALS registry, and unfortunately, you know, we were not successful in that. I'm hoping to go back to that topic and try to do that again. But again, there are some other studies. So I just want to be clear that there are a few opportunities to participate, and we are trying to share all of these opportunities with the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation, because I agree that's the go-to place to get information. And so, I know you invite other colleagues as well who can provide information, but, I think, really, that's really from the patient community perspective, I would say the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation is the go-to place to learn about new studies or studies that are open.
Yeah, and you can find all those links on our website. And Cynthia, you got a question? Go ahead, and then I'll grab some over in the chat box.
My question is about genetic testing. I'd like to know if genetic testing for PLS exists and what the difference is between genetic testing and biomarkers, if there is a difference.
No, these are all great questions. So in terms of genetic testing, first of all, our knowledge about the genes that cause ALS and or PLS continues to increase. That's also due to the fact that the technology has improved substantially. I mean, just to give you a sense, when I started working in the ALS clinic, that was 13 years ago, it was very hard to do any genetic testing, even for ALS. We would have to test one gene at a time. It was incredibly expensive. And so the technology was behind, even just 10 years ago. Now, over the last 3 or 4 years, new technology has developed so that we are now able to offer extensive ALS genetic testing for free. And that includes a panel of genes. So not just one gene at a time, but a number of genes tested at the same time. As we've been doing that, we have discovered, so first of all, that means that there's more information coming in, right? So the test becomes more widely used, and not only the number of people that participate, also the type of genes that are analyzed continues to increase. And all of this is generally, all of this knowledge is then kind of collated, and there are national public repositories of genetic data. And so different companies get information from them, and this continues to evolve, again, because the technology is so much better now. As we started doing more testing, and also some of the other research studies that were mentioned earlier, the one from Columbia, the one from University of Miami, et cetera, and others as well, we have realized that some of the same genes that can cause ALS in rare occasions have been described in people with PLS. So again, before we were not even testing people, right? Or if we were testing people, we were maybe testing one gene. So it was just not possible to even figure this out, even just 4 or 5 years ago. Now that we are testing more people, number one, and testing more genes, that's the other aspect of this, we are figuring out right now, as we speak, that there are a few people, not many, but a few people with PLS that have some of these genetic variants. The same goes for some other genes that have been associated more typically with some other diseases, whether it's Parkinson's or whether it's HSP. So again, the knowledge has continued to increase. So essentially, practically speaking, right now, there isn't a comprehensive PLS genetic panel yet, because again, we're still learning and we're still trying to understand what would be the best solution. And it's rare for people with PLS to have a genetic diagnosis, but let's say 10 years ago, it was almost impossible. Now it's actually happening in a few cases. I will say that all of these efforts, whether it's the CREATE Consortium or the Natural History Study at Columbia, they're all collecting DNA information. And so all of this information is then being collated in the back end. So I do expect more discoveries to happen, over the next few months and more genes to be discovered. So genetic variants are a biomarker. So in response to your question, is genetics a biomarker? Yes, it is, but it's not the only one. There are many more biomarkers in addition to genetics. And so obviously, if you have a genetic diagnosis, that could be considered, a marker of the diagnosis, a way to facilitate the diagnosis, but we need more because not every single person will have a genetic marker. And so we need to develop more biomarkers. So it's not traditionally thought of something that has to do with PLS, but now that you're asking, I do have a person I see in the clinic specifically who has a prominent sort of decreased motility. And so, as always, people can have two different diseases, right? And so it's important to make sure that there is a full gastrointestinal workup. to see if there's something else causing this, right? I mean, you cannot assume. But it could be that in some people it's related to PLS. Again, I haven't seen that prominently, but I've seen it at least in another person. So it could be potentially a rare manifestation of the disease. That said, obviously, it's important to make sure that there is a full workup because there could be something else also going on. And I do want to put in a plug for Linda's work too. So thank you, Linda, for sharing the link, because as I said earlier, while maybe some of these studies may be small or in other countries, I do want to say that researchers collaborate and share results in the back end. So wherever you are, wherever you can participate, please do so, because these things then ultimately, help everyone.
No, I just wanted to point out to everybody that the links and the emails and all that stuff, it's in the chat. All the information for what Dr. Paganoni was just talking about for the Capture ALS and for CBIG, the Open Patient Biobank, it's all there.
Tim, you got another question? Go ahead. And Patrice, you're next.
Yeah, I was just wondering on Cathy and Cynthia's note about nocturnal spasticity. What do you mean by that?
Well, for me, I notice more muscle tightness and jerking at night that I have noticed during the day. And I've often wondered whether I'm noticing it more or whether it's really because I'm still, or whether it's actually increased. I don't know the answer, Tim. I'm sorry.
So just, my experience, I used to, have at night when I go to bed, I'd have just random movement of my legs at night, and it would, because I'm laying in bed, etc. I actually take 1 tizanidine 4 milligram at night before I go to bed, and I don't have that issue anymore. So just my feedback.
I have had a major problem, and when I say major, that's what I mean. With everyone is familiar, I'm sure, with how the sensation of having a hand go to sleep or something, and that's what mine started out as, and now it has moved up to my arm and it's in my torso, and it's incredibly painful. And nothing that used to work for me to rid myself of the sensation works any longer. And I have to get out of in my chair and where I'm moving my arms normally. And sometimes it's 2:30 in the morning, but I'm up for the day because it's the only way in which I can relieve the pain. Is that PLS related?
So again, there's a number of symptoms that, I think many of you are reporting in the chat, whether it's urinary urgency, spasticity or tightness, or other things again that you've all mentioned. What people have reported to me is that oftentimes they are more common at night. There are medications for this. Interestingly, there are similar medications to the ones used for the same problem in ALS, which is also why sometimes, again, PLS historically has been treated by the same clinics where ALS, people with ALS are seen, because some of the symptoms are similar, even if the disease is different. But some of these things, like, again, spasticity, tightness at night, legs being restless at night, muscle contractions, spasms, that can be present in both ALS or PLS. And so the medications are sort of in the same categories, and oftentimes they're given at night, as I believe Tim was saying.
Dr. Sabrina, any experience with fatigue, or anyone else on the call? And maybe it's related to spasticity, but I pretty much, I can sleep 12 hours without a problem. Now, maybe it's something else, but it is odd.
I think in some of our previous surveys, and we published some of that was actually the most commonly reported issue, fatigue. So it's definitely very common. I do think that it could be due to a number of things. I do suspect that the spasticity or the tightness in the muscles may be part of it, because if you think about the mechanism of the disease, the upper motor neurons, the one that go from the brain to the spine, are affected in PLS. And what happens is that basically it makes the muscles contract all the time. It's almost as if the person with PLS is exercising all the time, even if you're sitting down in the chair. So while you may be sitting down, the muscles are actually contracting, they're working. And so that leads to fatigue. The other thing that I've heard is that many of these problems are worse in cold temperatures, because it's well known that cold temperatures make these upper motor neurons more active. Same with stress, pain, or other things. So anything that stresses out the nervous system can, whether it's cold, pain, or other things, can actually make the upper motor neurons more active, which means the muscles will be tighter, which means people will be more tired. And so anything that can be done, obviously it depends on where one lives, but also things like using warm blankets, or even things like all the way from massage to meditation, anything that can relax the body will in turn have this positive effect. It doesn't last long, but it can provide some benefit. Also medications, of course.
So Dr. Sabrina or Erica, would like a TENS unit help in some regards, or maybe extra vitamin D or magnesium? Is there anything that people can walk away with today with something that can help them?
I would say that anything that helps with general wellness, that can help relax the muscles, can actually help with spasticity, tightness, etc. Because it's not magic. It's really because of the way the upper motor neurons and the muscles work. So I would definitely agree that optimizing nutrition, hydration, electrolytes, exercise, they're not a solution for the disease. They don't necessarily or directly affect the disease, but can help again with that sort of circle that happens when the upper motor neurons are too active, that they make other things too active, like the muscles, etc. So the more we can relax them with heat, massage, stretching, exercise, hydration, and magnesium, and those things that can help.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so just real quick feedback, first on fatigue, the exercise, I agree, Norma, exercise as much as you possibly can. I will do, elliptical. You're tired when you get off the elliptical, so you get fatigue, right? You're stretching, weights, but doing everything you possibly can is important and it helps. What I would add to that, be specific towards balance exercises, things that help continue to train on your balance, I have found to be very important. The TENS unit you mentioned, I do the TENS unit actually every night. Whether it helps or not, maybe it's psychological, I don't know, but there does seem to be some benefit. You can try it, go buy one for, $50 or whatever on Amazon, you can try it and see, how that, potentially would help. But activity obviously is key, but fatigue will come with that. The other little nuance I would say, and it's kind of interesting, I was at my neurologist last week relating to cold. I actually physically moved to a warmer location simply because of the cold. If I go out in 30-degree temperature, I can't walk, right? That's how much it impacts me. Literally to the point, I don't eat ice cream anymore because it cools my body and I get stiff just eating ice cream. Right? That's how, even to the extent of drinking ice cold water, I can feel it. My leg muscles will start to spasm, etc. Just drinking cold water. So, cold is a definitive, aspect that affects me. And I've heard that from, many other people. And yes, spring's around the corner, and I have my, fleece pants on all the time, even though it's 40, 50 degrees out, but just staying warm. It's important.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. I appreciate all your comments. I've got one question here, and I think we're going to try to end on this because I know Erica and Sabrina have got a lot of things to get to this afternoon on their calendar. But given the low incidence of PLS, what strategies are being used to adapt ALS clinic trial designs or repurpose drugs to make them viable for the PLS community? Any thought about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, this has been high on the agenda for both last year's PLS conference and this year's. So right now, I feel like we have a little bit more to do in terms of figuring out the biomarkers and the causes of PLS, because if we were to get a drug from ALS, we need to make sure that it's a good fit from a biological standpoint for PLS. Definitely, that's a question that's often asked at different ALS meetings. Could this be a good fit for PLS? Right now, there isn't one that I know is in trials right now, but certainly there's been interest in developing that. So I wish I could tell you that there is one right now, but I think, what I can tell you for sure is that now that we are working together with the ALS community, having a group of people with PLS in ALS trials is now part of the conversation. So I think that that's the important step that we have seen. And I will say that, again, the awards that the Spastic Paraplegia awarded, I see Christine here. I know, you came to Niels in Florida and gave the awards. And then, again, including the startle reflex research that you actually initiated as a community and now, recently received the award. I think it's incredibly important. I cannot emphasize this enough. Now that you've been there in October, now that we've had this annual conference, this conference, which will now be annual in San Diego and at the Global Forum, I do think that we can see many more advancements happening soon. And also thank you, Mr. Maran, and also the Campbell family for the awards that we'll be giving next year. We are already in contact with our colleagues, including, Erica and I had a few calls, including people at different time zones, including Asia. It's always hard to find the right time to meet, but we are having those conversations actually to promote new research and new abstracts so that we get the best research for the new awards that will be given at the conference in December. So we're very excited and thank you for all the partnership.
That is so wonderful. I thank you so very much, Erica. Thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, just thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. And also, it was my first time to be part of this talk. And it was just wonderful, to see. I realized even more how much you guys are doing with the foundation, connecting people like between them, but also with us. So just grateful to be invited today. So thank you so much.
Well,